Silence is one of the most underestimated weapons a woman holds. People often confuse silence with weakness, but the truth is the opposite. When a girl stops replying, when she no longer argues, when she stops defending herself with endless explanations, the world assumes she gave up. But in reality, her silence is her strength. Silence is not an empty space. It is a mirror that reflects the actions of the other person. Words can be twisted, arguments can be ignored, but silence cannot be denied. It lingers. It forces the other person to hear their own echoes. And that's why silence hurts far more than any words ever could. Girls are often expected to explain themselves. Society pressures them to justify, to prove their loyalty, to show their love, to cry and express endlessly. But the Stoic mindset teaches the opposite. Your peace is your power. When a girl learns that not every insult deserves a reply, not every rejection needs tears, and not every misunderstanding deserves a paragraph, that's when she steps into her power. Her silence becomes louder than any explanation. Because silence is not about absence of voice, it's about presence of dignity. Think about this. When a guy believes a girl will always call back, always text again, always defend her side, he becomes careless. He takes her energy for granted. But when the girl suddenly goes silent, when she ignores the calls, when she doesn't text back, when she pulls her energy away, something shifts. For the first time, the guy wonders, what happened? Why did she stop? That moment is where silence begins to work. It's not punishment, it's not revenge. It's simply a statement. My peace is more valuable than your validation. Silence is powerful because it triggers imagination. When a girl keeps talking, the other person knows exactly where she stands. But when she suddenly goes silent, the mind of the other person begins to race. Does she hate me now? Did she find someone else? Did she stop caring completely? These questions eat them alive. Silence is more painful because it leaves space for unanswered questions. And unanswered questions haunt far longer than any explanation ever could. For girls, silence is not only a way of hurting those who disrespected them, it's also a way of healing themselves. When you stop explaining, you stop draining. Silence gives back energy that words keep wasting. Silence is self-healing. It whispers to you, you are still valuable even when no one acknowledges you. That is the beauty of Stoic psychology. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally care for yourself more than you care for someone else's approval. Many girls fear that if they stop talking, the other person will win. But silence is not defeat. It is dignity. Imagine a girl in a relationship where she is constantly misunderstood. Every time she writes long messages, she calls, she explains. But one day she decides to stop. She doesn't argue, she doesn't defend, she simply withdraws. That day she doesn't lose. That day she wins, because she chose her peace over chaos. Her silence is not empty, it's filled with dignity. Silence is also a boundary. When a girl stops responding, she is saying without words, my energy will no longer be wasted here. That's the line where respect begins to return. As long as you keep giving energy freely, people will take it for granted. But when you withdraw, they realize for the first time how valuable your presence was. Silence makes your absence louder than your presence ever was. That's why Stoics valued silence more than noise. There's a special grace in feminine silence. Angry words are messy, but silence is elegant. Imagine a girl being insulted, but instead of reacting, she simply smiles faintly and walks away. That moment confuses the offender. They expected drama, tears, or anger. But instead, they are left with the weight of their own behavior. That is the charm of Stoic silence. It's not just self-control. It's a silent crown of grace that terrifies those who thought they could shake you. Silence is emotional independence. Girls often believe closure will come from the other person. But the truth is, closure is born in silence. When you finally tell yourself, "I don't need their explanation to heal," you are free. Silence is proof that you have taken back the power over your own healing. You no longer wait for someone else to repair what they broke. You stop needing apologies. You stop needing recognition. You choose yourself. That's not coldness, and that's self-love in its purest form. Finally, silence has an impact beyond personal relationships. It shifts the way society sees women. When girls constantly explain, the world gets used to ignoring them. But when girls embrace silence, society is forced to listen differently. Silence becomes the loudest boundary. It's the loudest no. It's the loudest declaration of dignity. A woman doesn't need to scream to be heard. She doesn't need to argue to be respected. Sometimes her silence, her calm withdrawal, is the most powerful speech she will ever give. Silence doesn't just expose others. It exposes you to yourself. When a girl stops talking, she finally begins listening to her own inner voice. Words often cover up the truth. We distract ourselves with explanations, with venting, with constant attempts to be understood. But when you are silent, you finally hear the truth clearly. I stayed too long. They never respected me. I don't need closure, I need peace. Silence creates space for self-reflection, and that's where wisdom grows. Stoics knew that when emotions scream, wisdom whispers. Silence is what makes those whispers audible. Silence also exposes the intentions of others. When you stop explaining yourself, people reveal their true nature. If they truly respect you, they will reach out with honesty. If they only used you, they will vanish. If they were manipulating you, they will become angry when you stop responding. Silence doesn't need to confront anyone. It simply reveals the reality they tried to hide. Words can create illusions, but silence cuts through them. And for a girl, this is liberating. You no longer need to test people. Your silence does the testing for you. Silence hurts because it removes control. People often thrive on reactions. They insult you, hoping you'll cry. They ignore you, expecting you to chase. They misunderstand you, waiting for you to explain. But when you don't give them that reaction, they lose their control. That's why silence is so unsettling. It's like holding up a mirror where they see themselves, not your defenses. A girl who masters silence is a girl who cannot be controlled. Her peace is unshakable because she no longer gives power away. For girls, silence after disrespect is the ultimate act of self-respect. Think about it. Anyone can shout back. Anyone can send long, angry texts. Anyone can beg for understanding. But very few can remain calm, composed, and detached. That's what makes silence powerful. It's not about pretending not to care. It's about caring so much for yourself that you refuse to beg. You refuse to lower your dignity. And in that silence, you build a wall of strength no one can tear down. Silence also has an unexpected effect. It makes people curious. When you are always available, always responding, always justifying, they think they know you. But when you stop, when you become unavailable, when you stop over-explaining, you suddenly become a mystery. And mystery is powerful. People begin to wonder, what is she thinking? What is she doing? Why isn't she reacting? That curiosity keeps them awake at night more than any words you could have spoken. Silence is not about cutting people off, it's about cutting chaos off. Girls often confuse silence with being cold, but it's not. Silence doesn't mean you stop loving. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you refuse to waste love and care where it's not respected. Silence is simply the line between self-love and self-destruction. You don't stop giving. You just stop giving where it hurts. That choice, though quiet, is the loudest act of empowerment you can make. Silence teaches lessons that words never can. If you scream, "Respect me," the other person can argue back. But if you withdraw silently, they are forced to confront themselves. People don't change when you argue. They change when your absence makes them realize what they lost. Silence is not about making them suffer. It's about teaching them that your presence was never guaranteed. That's a lesson they will never forget. Silence builds confidence in ways that explanations destroy. Every time you explain yourself, you are giving someone else authority over your identity. You are saying, "I need you to understand me so I can feel at peace." But when you choose silence, you send a very different message. "I know who I am. I don't need your approval to validate me." That confidence shakes people. Because in a world where everyone is desperate to be seen, the girl who can be silent is the girl who already sees herself clearly. Silence is also deeply healing for broken hearts. After betrayal, the instinct is to demand closure, to ask why, to get answers. But most answers don't heal, they only reopen wounds. Silence, however, allows the wound to close. Silence says, "I don't need to understand why they hurt me. I only need to understand that I deserve peace." Healing doesn't come from their explanation, it comes from your detachment. And silence is the medicine that makes that healing possible. At its core, silence is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is discipline. It is dignity. It is grace. For a girl, silence is a reminder that her worth is not in how loudly she defends herself, but in how calmly she protects her peace. The world may never fully understand it, but silence doesn't need to be understood. Silence is not about winning arguments. It's about winning yourself back. And that, in the end, is the greatest victory of all. Silence has the power to transform how a girl sees herself. When you no longer feel the need to defend every action, when you stop craving validation from people who never valued you, you start to realize your own strength. Silence creates inner clarity. You learn that your worth is not something to be debated, explained, or proven. It simply is. And when you stand in that quiet truth, no one can shake it. That is why silence feels like strength, because it roots you in who you are without the noise of other people's opinions. In relationships, silence can be more effective than any argument. When a girl walks away quietly instead of screaming, she shifts the balance of power. Arguments feed drama, but silence starves it. And in that starvation, the other person has to confront themselves. Silence is not about running away. It's about stepping back so the truth can stand without interference. And very often, that quiet withdrawal is what makes the deepest impact. Silence is also a teacher of patience. In a world where everyone rushes to reply, where everyone wants the last word, a girl who stays silent practices control. She doesn't need instant revenge, instant clarity, or instant closure. She understands that time will reveal everything, that patience is rare, and it terrifies those who live off chaos. Because the girl who can remain calm and quiet is the girl who cannot be manipulated by urgency. Silence, when chosen, is not weakness. It's power in disguise. Anyone can yell, anyone can argue, but not everyone can choose silence when every nerve inside them wants to react. That restraint is strength. That restraint is what separates the wise from the reactive. When a girl chooses silence, she proves she's not controlled by her emotions. She is controlled by her values. And that kind of power is impossible to break. For girls, silence is also a strategy of protection. Every word you say can be twisted. Every explanation can be ignored. Every emotional outburst can be used against you. But silence leaves no weapon in their hands. Silence protects your dignity like armor. It leaves nothing for them to attack, nothing for them to manipulate. You may feel the urge to explain, but silence protects you better than words ever could. Silence exposes the difference between those who truly care and those who don't. When you stop talking, the ones who care will notice. They will reach out. They will try to understand. But the ones who don't care will disappear. And that's the truth you need. Silence saves you from wasting years chasing fake connections. It makes clear who belongs in your life and who never deserved a place in the first place. Silence can also be the most painful punishment, though not given with malice. When someone disrespects you and you respond with calm silence, they are left with their guilt. Words can be defended against, but silence leaves them to wrestle with themselves. That quiet absence, that unanswered call, that unread reply, it lingers. It makes them reflect in ways arguments never could. And sometimes that silent reflection is the sharpest lesson life teaches. Silence shifts focus from others back to yourself. Instead of spending endless nights drafting texts, making calls, or arguing to prove your worth, silence gives you space to redirect that energy inward. You start reading, healing, creating, growing. You realize the time you were wasting explaining yourself could be spent building yourself. And when you build yourself in silence, you shine in ways that words could never make you shine. Silence also makes space for dignity after heartbreak. When you are hurt, the temptation is to prove your side. But dignity is when you choose not to. Dignity is when you say, "My silence will be my answer." That kind of response is not cold. It is full of respect for yourself. And the world respects those who respect themselves. In silence, you preserve that dignity. And dignity is worth far more than being understood. Ultimately, silence is freedom. Words tie you to other people's reactions. Explanations tie you to their approval. Arguments tie you to their chaos. But silence cuts the rope. It sets you free. Free to live without begging to be heard. Free to walk away without turning back. Free to build a life where your peace is not at the mercy of someone else's attention. And when a girl learns this freedom, her silence becomes her greatest weapon and her greatest healing all at once. Silence for a girl becomes a shield against manipulation. The moment you stop explaining yourself, manipulators lose their grip. They thrive on your reactions, your defenses, your emotional outbursts. But when you withdraw into silence, they have nothing to twist, nothing to use, nothing to feed on. This is why silence terrifies manipulators. It starves them, and in starving them, you regain your strength. Silence is not about pride. It's about peace. A girl who chooses silence after being misunderstood is not arrogant. She is simply saying, "My inner peace matters more than your misunderstanding." That is the ultimate act of maturity, because words try to fix what's broken outside, but silence focuses on healing what's inside, and peace will always be more valuable than being right in someone else's eyes. When a girl chooses silence, she is choosing discipline. Anyone can react instantly, but discipline is staying quiet until the storm inside calms down. Silence gives you space to respond with wisdom instead of emotion. It teaches you patience, emotional control, and strength. A girl who has mastered silence is a girl who has mastered herself. And self-mastery is the highest form of power. Silence also sends a clear message. I will not waste my energy where it is not respected. Girls are taught to give endlessly, time, attention, emotion, love. But silence is the moment you take that energy back. It's the moment you say, "No more free access to my soul." That quiet refusal is far louder than any speech, because silence doesn't beg, it withdraws. And in that withdrawal, you reclaim your worth. Silence makes people confront their own emptiness. When a girl walks away quietly, the other person is forced to sit with the echo of their actions. Words could have been argued with, but silence leaves them alone with themselves. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't plead. It just exists. And that existence is haunting, because nothing is heavier than the absence of a voice you once took for granted. Silence also breaks cycles of toxicity. Arguments go in circles. Justifications never end. Explanations are ignored. But silence cuts the cycle completely. It says, "This ends here." That choice may feel hard at first, but it's the bravest one. Because silence doesn't only free you from them, it frees you from the endless loop of trying to be understood by someone who never wanted to understand you. Silence is also a test of true connection. When you stop explaining, stop reaching, stop overgiving, you see who actually comes closer. Real ones will notice your absence and value it. Fake ones will vanish. This truth is painful but necessary. Silence reveals who is truly with you. And for a girl, that knowledge is gold. Because once you know who values your presence, you stop wasting yourself on those who don't. Silence is elegance in motion. Anger burns dignity, but silence preserves it. Imagine a girl walking away from disrespect without a single word. That picture alone is unforgettable. Her silence says more than an hour of shouting ever could. That's why silence is timeless. It's graceful, it's dignified, it's powerful. It is not just the absence of words, it is the presence of self-respect. Silence also gives clarity about your own emotions. Sometimes we think we want someone back. Sometimes we think we need closure. But in silence you realize, I don't want them. I want peace. Silence separates need from habit, attachment from love, and pain from growth. That clarity is priceless, because once you see the truth, you no longer beg for what was breaking you. Ultimately, silence is transformation. A girl who once begged for replies, who once over-explained, who once tried to prove her worth, becomes unrecognizable when she chooses silence. She is no longer the girl chasing. She is no longer the girl pleading. She is the girl who knows her power. And that transformation is unshakable. Because once a girl learns the language of silence, she never goes back to the noise. Silence for a girl becomes a declaration of self-worth. When she no longer reacts to disrespect, when she no longer argues with people who already decided not to understand her, she is making a powerful statement. I am not available for disrespect anymore. That quiet boundary speaks louder than shouting ever could. Because words can be ignored, but silence makes people feel your absence in their bones. Silence is also a way of shifting the balance of control. In toxic dynamics, the one who explains, defends, and chases is always the one who loses power. But when a girl becomes silent, she regains control of her own narrative. She's no longer at the mercy of their replies or their moods. She takes her energy back, and that scares them, because they realize she no longer depends on them to feel whole. Silence after betrayal is one of the strongest acts of resilience. Many people beg for answers after being hurt. They demand explanations. But a girl who chooses silence is telling herself, I don't need them to explain why they broke me. I only need to focus on how I will rebuild myself. That shift in focus is what makes her unstoppable. Her silence isn't just absence, it's the sound of her strength returning. Silence also teaches emotional detachment. Words keep you tied to the past. Every explanation is another thread connecting you to the person who hurt you, but silence cuts those threads. It gives you freedom. You stop waiting for closure. You stop waiting for apologies. You stop waiting for them. And in that silence, you finally move forward. It's not coldness, it's liberation. Silence for a girl is a silent glow-up. When you stop explaining, you start investing in yourself. You hit the gym, you study, you work, you create. You focus on becoming the version of yourself that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. And when people see that version of you, confident, peaceful, glowing, they realize that your silence was not weakness, it was preparation. Silence is the highest form of self-control. Anyone can scream. Anyone can send long texts. But not everyone can resist the urge. When a girl stays silent in moments where her emotions are burning, she proves her control. That level of restraint is what Stoics called strength. Because you cannot control others, but you can control yourself. And silence is the most graceful display of that control. Silence also reveals who truly values you. The ones who care will notice your absence and reach out. The ones who don't will stay silent too. And though it hurts, it saves you from wasting more of your heart on people who never deserved it. Silence answers questions you were too afraid to ask. It shows you the truth without needing words. And the truth always sets you free. Silence, when chosen, becomes elegance. Imagine a girl sitting quietly, not arguing, not defending, simply composed. That image carries more weight than any angry outburst, because silence has grace. It shows maturity. It shows dignity. It shows a kind of strength that doesn't need to shout. That's why silence is often remembered longer than words. It leaves an imprint that arguments never could. Silence can be terrifying to those who once had power over you. They expect you to beg. They expect you to explain. They expect you to break down. But when you don't, when you walk away quietly, they realize they've lost control completely. That realization shakes them. Because nothing is more powerful than a girl who no longer reacts. That's when silence becomes the ultimate revenge. Not loud, not cruel, just dignified. At its deepest level, silence is healing disguised as strength. For a girl, silence is the bridge between pain and peace. It doesn't erase the hurt, but it creates the space to rise above it. Words can reopen wounds, but silence lets them close. And in that quiet healing, she becomes unbreakable. Her silence says, I don't need to be heard to know my worth. I don't need to be understood to be at peace. My silence is my strength, my healing, my final word. Silence becomes a sanctuary for a girl's soul. In a noisy world filled with opinions, expectations, and judgments, silence is the only place where she can hear herself clearly. It's where she realizes her worth isn't dependent on anyone's approval. It's where she learns that peace is not given, it's created. And once she finds that sanctuary, she will never trade it for chaos again. Silence after disappointment is strength disguised as softness. Most expect a girl to cry, to plead, to demand answers. But when she quietly walks away instead, she demonstrates the highest form of control. That silence doesn't mean she didn't feel the pain. It means she refused to give the pain more power than it already had. That restraint is what turns wounds into wisdom. Silence reveals the depth of her self-respect. When a girl chooses silence over confrontation, she is showing the world, I value myself too much to waste energy on people who don't. That level of self-respect is magnetic. It draws the right people closer and pushes the wrong people away. Her silence is not emptiness. It is a filter that separates what deserves her attention from what doesn't. Silence is also a form of communication. It says things that words cannot. It says, I noticed. It says, I understand, but I won't explain. It says, I've moved on. Silence has its own language, and those who are wise enough will hear it. For those who don't, no amount of words would have made them understand anyway. Silence creates a shift in power. People who expected her to always be available, always be forgiving, always be explaining, suddenly realize they no longer have access to her energy. That absence shakes them. Because silence isn't just withdrawal. It's a quiet reminder that access to her heart was a privilege, not a right. Silence is elegance under fire. When insults are thrown, when lies are spread, when misunderstandings multiply, most people fight back. But when a girl remains calm and quiet, her silence makes the noise look foolish. She doesn't need to defend against lies. Her character speaks for her. Her dignity shines brighter than any rumor. And in time, the truth always sides with the silent. Silence allows a girl to redirect her energy. Instead of wasting nights writing long, unsent messages, she begins writing goals. Instead of crying for replies, she cries out her pain in silence and then builds something meaningful from it. That energy shift changes everything. Because silence doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing everything for yourself instead of others. Silence, when embraced, is also freedom from emotional slavery. The moment you stop explaining yourself, you stop being chained to how others perceive you. A girl who chooses silence says, my worth is not up for debate. And once you realize that, you are free. You no longer live like a prisoner of someone else's opinion. You live as the master of your own peace. Silence is not passive. It is active healing. It creates space for reflection, for meditation, for growth. In silence, girls rediscover their strength, their beauty, their independence. They realize that the loudest statement they can make is to stop explaining, stop chasing, and start living. Silence is the pause that transforms pain into wisdom and wisdom into strength. In the end, silence is not just a choice. For a girl, it is a lifestyle of dignity. It is the art of knowing when to walk away, when to hold back, when to let absence speak louder than presence. It's not about winning arguments. It's about winning herself. Silence becomes her crown, invisible, yet undeniable. And once she learns to wear it, she will never lower it again. Silence becomes the ultimate act of detachment. When a girl chooses not to argue, not to justify, not to run after those who left, she is breaking the chains of attachment. She is telling herself, I will not cling to what disrespects me. That quiet detachment is what sets her free, because real strength is not holding on, it is letting go without a word. Silence after disrespect is the loudest message of all. Words can beg for understanding, but silence demands respect. A girl who no longer reacts is a girl who has chosen her dignity over drama. She doesn't need to raise her voice because her silence already says, I am done explaining to those who refuse to listen. And that calm exit is unforgettable. Silence also restores balance. When emotions burn inside, silence cools the fire. It prevents words you'll regret later. It stops you from lowering yourself to the level of those who hurt you. For a girl, silence is self-preservation. It's choosing long-term peace over short-term satisfaction. And that choice, though difficult, always pays off in the end. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, but it is actually the purest form of strength. Anyone can lash out in anger. Anyone can defend themselves endlessly, but only the strong can stay silent when their pride is provoked. For a girl, that silence is not cowardice. It is courage. Courage to remain calm, to walk away, to protect her soul from unnecessary battles. Silence is also a gift to the future. Every time a girl chooses silence instead of chaos, she invests in her own growth. She saves herself from scars that angry words might have left. She protects her reputation from being dragged into petty arguments. She builds an image of calm strength that people remember. In the long run, silence becomes a shield she is grateful for. Silence is power because it creates uncertainty. When you stop explaining, others are left wondering. Did she move on? Did she stop caring? Did she find something better? That uncertainty eats at them, because silence forces them to create answers in their own mind, and often those imagined answers hurt them more than anything you could have said. Silence makes a girl's presence more valuable. When you are always available, people take you for granted. But when you withdraw, your absence is felt deeply. People begin to miss the voice they ignored. They remember the comfort they dismissed. And that realization only comes in silence. Words cannot create that longing. Only absence can. Silence is an act of self-trust. It means you trust yourself enough not to explain, not to convince, not to beg. You trust that your worth doesn't need validation. You trust that time will reveal the truth. You trust that peace matters more than pride. For a girl, this trust is life-changing. Because once she trusts her silence, she no longer fears losing anyone. Silence is also elegance in heartbreak. After being hurt, many people lose themselves in noise, screaming, accusing, crying out loud. But a girl who chooses silence carries herself with grace even in pain. Her silence says, "Yes, I was hurt, but no, I will not be broken." That grace is unforgettable, because strength covered in softness is the most powerful form of beauty. In the end, silence is not just about others. It's about the girl herself. It is her space of growth, her place of healing, her path to dignity. It's where she learns that she doesn't need to be loud to be strong. She doesn't need to explain to be understood. She doesn't need to fight to prove her worth. Her silence already says it all. And that truth, once learned, changes her forever. Silence is the art of letting actions speak. When a girl stops defending herself and instead focuses on living better, her life becomes the response. Success, growth, and peace are louder than any explanation. Her silence says, "Watch me rise without needing to prove anything to you." And that message is far more powerful than words. Silence is also protection from regret. Words spoken in anger can never be taken back. But silence saves you from that. When a girl chooses silence, she is protecting her dignity from being stained by emotions that will pass. She is choosing wisdom over impulse. And that choice creates a future where she looks back and feels proud of her restraint. Silence reveals who truly values presence. The ones who take you for granted expect you to always be there, always respond, always explain. But when a girl withdraws into silence, the truth surfaces. Those who truly care will miss her. Those who never did will fade away. That revelation, though painful, is clarity. And clarity is a gift. Silence can be the most haunting form of communication. Words can be argued with. Excuses can be ignored. But silence? Silence leaves no defense. It lingers in the mind like an unfinished sentence. It forces the other person to fill the void with their own guilt and imagination. And sometimes, that quiet echo is more painful than any scream. Silence strengthens self-respect. Every time a girl refuses to explain herself to people who don't deserve it, she adds another brick to the foundation of her dignity. She builds inner strength piece by piece. Silence is not emptiness. It is construction. It is the building of a stronger version of herself that doesn't crumble under judgment. Silence is an invisible boundary. It doesn't shout, "Don't cross me." It simply closes the door without noise. That kind of quiet strength is undeniable. People who once thought they had easy access suddenly realize the door is shut, and the absence of words makes that boundary even clearer. Because silence doesn't just set limits, it enforces them without explanation. Silence also gives space for emotional clarity. In the heat of betrayal or disrespect, emotions cloud vision. But when a girl chooses silence, she creates distance between her feelings and her decisions. She no longer acts out of anger or desperation. She acts out of clarity, and clarity always leads to better choices. Silence is a form of quiet elegance that leaves a lasting impression. Long after words are forgotten, people remember how you carried yourself. They remember the girl who didn't scream back, who didn't beg, who didn't lower her dignity. They remember the silence, and that memory is what makes silence timeless. It lingers when everything else fades. Silence is healing through absence. When a girl stops talking to the one who hurt her, she's not punishing them. She's protecting herself. She is creating distance between her soul and the source of her pain. That quiet distance is what allows wounds to close, because silence doesn't demand apologies. Silence creates space for peace. Silence is the crown of a strong woman. It's invisible, yet everyone sees it. It's quiet, yet everyone feels it. When a girl learns to wear silence as her crown, she no longer bows to disrespect. She no longer bends for validation. She no longer breaks under misunderstanding. Her silence becomes her throne, and her dignity becomes unshakable. Silence is the moment when a girl chooses her future over her past. Every time she refuses to explain herself to those who didn't value her, she is taking a step forward. She is no longer trapped in endless cycles of proving, chasing, or begging. Her silence says, "I am done with yesterday. I am building tomorrow." And that quiet decision shifts her entire destiny. Silence breaks the chains of dependency. When a girl stops waiting for replies, stops needing closure, stops begging for understanding, she reclaims her independence. She is no longer emotionally enslaved to someone else's choices. Her silence is her declaration of freedom. I belong to myself now. That realization is the first step to unshakable confidence. Silence is strength because it cannot be manipulated. Words can be twisted, emotions can be exploited, but silence leaves nothing to misuse. When a girl becomes silent, she gives away no power. She holds all of it within herself. That is why manipulators fear silence, because it's the one thing they cannot control. Silence makes self-love visible. A girl who chooses silence over chasing is showing herself respect. She is saying without words, "I deserve better." And that silent self-respect radiates outward. People notice. They realize she values herself too much to waste time where it isn't returned. Her silence becomes her most beautiful language of love. Love for herself. Silence transforms pain into mystery. When a girl cries, begs, or explains, people know exactly what she feels. But when she is silent, they don't know. That mystery makes them restless. It forces them to guess. It makes them wonder what's happening inside her mind. And that curiosity is often more haunting than hearing her words directly. Silence is dignity after betrayal. When someone breaks your trust, you can either scream or go silent. The scream makes you look desperate, but silence makes you look dignified. It shows that even though you were hurt, you will not reduce yourself. Silence is the quiet armor that keeps your heart intact even when it's been broken. Silence also clears the noise inside your own heart. When you stop explaining, when you stop chasing, the storm begins to settle. Silence gives you space to breathe, to think, to heal. And in that stillness, the truth rises to the surface. You realize what really matters and what doesn't. Silence becomes the compass that points you back to yourself. Silence is unforgettable because it flips the script. People expect reactions. They expect anger, tears, or explanations. But when they get silence, they are thrown off balance. They replay the silence in their mind over and over, trying to decode it. And in that process, they learn the lesson no words could ever teach. They lost access to you. Silence is empowerment through withdrawal. When a girl walks away quietly, she is reclaiming her energy. She is saying, "I don't need to fight for a place where I was never respected." That withdrawal is not weakness, it is wisdom. Because sometimes the loudest no is the one you never say. It's the door you quietly close. Silence is transformation in disguise. The girl who once begged now meditates. The girl who once explained now grows. The girl who once cried for replies now builds her future. Silence is not the end of her voice. It is the rebirth of her strength. And when she rises again, she rises quieter, calmer, stronger than ever before. Silence is the closure she gives herself. Many girls wait endlessly for someone to explain, to apologize, to admit the truth. But real closure does not come from them. It comes from silence. It comes from the moment she says, "I don't need your words. My peace is enough." That self-given closure is the strongest kind because no one can ever take it away again. Silence is the unseen revolution of a girl's heart. It is the quiet rebellion against a world that told her to always be soft, always explain, always adjust. When she chooses silence, she chooses herself. And that is revolutionary. Because the strongest change does not come from shouting. It comes from walking away without a word. Silence is the moment where she reclaims her time. Instead of wasting hours typing long texts, instead of sleepless nights begging for answers, she uses that time to rebuild herself. She learns, she heals, she grows. And when the world sees her again, they realize her silence was not emptiness. It was investment. Investment in her own soul. Silence hurts more than words because it cannot be undone. Words can be explained away, arguments can be forgotten, apologies can soften wounds. But silence remains. It echoes in the spaces between memories. It haunts those who expected noise. It is the unanswered question that lingers forever. That is why silence is unforgettable. Silence is her way of saying, "I am enough." She doesn't need to beg for recognition. She doesn't need to fight for respect. She doesn't need to explain her worth. Her silence speaks it all. Because a girl who can sit with herself in silence has already mastered the most important truth. She does not need anyone else to complete her. Silence is the teacher of self-mastery. When a girl chooses not to react, she is learning control over her mind. When she chooses not to explain, She is mastering control over her emotions. When she chooses not to chase, she is taking control of her life. And that mastery is what makes her unshakable. Because nothing is stronger than a woman who has mastered herself. Silence is the ending and the beginning. It is the end of begging, proving, and explaining. But it is also the beginning of dignity, clarity, and freedom. A girl who steps into silence closes one chapter but opens another. One where she is the author, not a character in someone else's story. That shift is what makes silence so powerful. Silence teaches the world how to treat her. People learn from reactions. If she always reacts, they think they can push further. But when she goes silent, they realize the line has been crossed. Silence becomes the unspoken rule. I will not stay where I am not valued. And that lesson lasts longer than any speech ever could. Silence is her crown of strength. It doesn't glitter, it doesn't make noise, but it shines in its own way. When she sits in silence, she looks calm, but inside she is rising higher than ever before. People may misunderstand it, but that doesn't matter, because the crown of silence is not for others to see. It is for her to wear with pride. Silence, at its core, is her freedom. It is the final word she never speaks, the final boundary she never explains, the final act of self-love she doesn't need to announce. Silence is not emptiness. It is fullness, of peace, of strength, of dignity. And when a girl truly embraces silence, she realizes she was never voiceless. She was always powerful. Her silence was her loudest truth all along.